don't you find it interesting now all of a sudden America cares about a relationship with Africa? I really find it interesting. Watch this clip, we'll come back and discuss.
I am happy that we're having this debate and talking about the continent of Africa. And if we do that, we've got to listen to the I can just recall, and sometimes many of my colleagues, especially on the other side of the aisle, argue that we don't get the votes we need at times in the UN from African countries. I recall when we were trying to get votes in regards to Russia's illegal invasion into Ukraine. And I had to call African ambassadors. And they said, now you're calling me? We haven't heard from the United States for a while. Now you want something from me? We've been asking for assistance in regards to security. And then I watched to see what was taking place when we look at our diplomacy. It was over 2 decades it took before in the 117th Congress we passed a state authorization bill and had to do that through the NDAA as opposed to saying we're going to stand strongly on diplomacy. Guess what China did during that period of time? They doubled their diplomacy budget. Guess what else is happening? For the first time, China has more consulates than the United States of America. General Kelly said either we do and get engaged in more diplomacy or you're going to have to spend more money on bullets. We have an opportunity to engage and listen to allies and work with our allies. Many allies who have more and should have more responsibility on the continent because they colonized it, working with us collectively to try to make sure that the Chinas and the Russias of the world are not invested and we are invested and we are not. It's our challenge. And I hope that when we get past this debate, you'll be able to have another one. And I look forward to doing it particularly in our committee so that we can figure out collectively together, as Ms. Ilhan said, how we can work together and listen to make sure that we have an overall strategy. And I say this in regards to both parties. I say this to the administration, who should be doing more on the continent of Africa. So yes, this is not a partisan debate. This is an American debate. This is an opportunity to have attention to a continent that is the fastest growing and the youngest on this planet, that we have ignored for far too long. We have to wake up and do more for the continent of Africa and figure it out. Diplomacy. Figure out how we can help protect them from being victimized by terrorism. Figure out how we can strengthen institutions. We've got a lot of work to do. Figure out how we reauthorize AGOA. Figure out how we work with the African Union. Figure out how we work with the African organizations. That's our challenge. Because if not, we imperil ourselves. So I could agree, this is not just an investment in the continent, it's an investment for America and America's leadership.
That was a US politician. He's actually a US representative and he's a Democrat. Last time I covered a US senator talking about, Africa and how the foreign policy the US has for Africa is not really beneficial and they should actually change it up a little bit.
We have built a foreign policy of hectoring and moralizing and lecturing countries that don't want anything to do with it. The Chinese have a foreign policy of building roads and bridges and feeding poor people, and I think that we should pursue a foreign policy, a diplomacy of respect, and a foreign policy that is not rooted in moralizing. It's rooted in the national interest of this country.
The US diplomats are really trying to appeal to us and tell us that they care, and really honestly, basically, in my opinion, showing us how powerful we are, or how much they need to work to change our minds and to have a relationship with us, because they see other nations doing well in that regard. Anyways, fam, I have a lot to say about this topic, so I'll see you on the next live and we will discuss in depth why the US cares about Africa all of a sudden.